Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ibrahim Traoré's era. Today something is happening in Burkina Faso that has shaken the world. It is unfolding right here in the land of Thomas Sankara, the land of defiance, the land of resistance. For decades, foreigners have walked into Africa, carrying papers, reports, and lies. They have labeled African leaders as dictators, African armies as criminals, and African nations as failed states. They did so freely, without fear, as if this continent had no voice, no power, no pride. But this week history was made. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before the world and thundered, "Enough is enough." The United Nations, in its so-called Children in Armed Conflict report, accused the Burkinabè armed forces of recruiting children, committing sexual abuse, and attacking schools. Can you imagine? For the Burkinabè, this was more than an insult, it was an attack on their honor. And so the people asked the questions that pierced through the lies. Where was the UN when terrorists butchered innocent villagers? Where was the UN when extremists burned down schools? Where was the UN when orphans cried beside the graves of their murdered parents? They were absent, silent. They only appear with their reports that without fail echo the agendas of foreign powers. When this report landed in Ouagadougou, Traoré did not waste a single breath. He gathered his council, reviewed the accusations, and announced his decision with thunder in his voice. The UN's representative, Carol Flores Marijniak, was declared persona non grata and ordered out of Burkina Faso immediately. No negotiations, no apologies, no diplomatic back and forth. She was expelled, finished, gone. For the first time in modern African history, the leader of a small landlocked country looked the UN in the eye and said, "You cannot lie about us and remain in our land." The announcement sent shockwaves across the nation. In the streets of Ouagadougou, young men and women waved the Burkinabè flag high, shouting, "Dignity or death." Women clapped and ululated in the marketplaces. Elders proclaimed, "Sankara's spirit is alive again." Because this was not just about a UN official. It was about reclaiming sovereignty. It was a warning to every foreign agent hiding behind NGOs and humanitarian missions. Burkina Faso is no longer your playground. But let me ask you, why is it that every time Africa rises, suddenly these organizations publish reports of abuses? Why do they never issue reports on how weapons from the West end up in the hands of terrorists? Why do they never investigate how child soldiers are funded by secret networks linked to Western capitals? The hypocrisy is endless. And Traoré named it for what it is. He went further and warned, "From today, any foreigner, whether NGO, diplomat, or international staff, who disrespects the dignity of Burkina Faso will be dealt with firmly. This is our land. We will tell our own story." That, my brothers and sisters, was not merely an expulsion. It was a red line. It was a lesson to Africans everywhere. Respect is not begged for. It is demanded. The days of being insulted in our own homes are over. When news broke of Traoré's action, the world was stunned. Western media rushed to paint him as a dictator, a strongman, a radical. But do you know what struck me the most? Not their spin. What stunned me was the silence of African leaders. Not one president, not even the African Union, stepped forward to say, "This is sovereignty. This is justice." That silence spoke louder than words. It revealed the chains still binding many of our leaders. Chains of fear. Fear of losing aid. Fear of sanctions. Fear of displeasing their foreign masters. They sit quietly in their palaces, pretending not to see, because they know if they applaud Traoré, their donors in Paris, Washington, London, or Brussels will turn on them. But while leaders remained quiet, the people of Africa did not. In Mali, crowds filled the streets in solidarity with their Burkinabè brothers. In Niger, youth painted murals of Traoré alongside Assimi Goïta and Abdourahmane Tiani, calling them the new lions of Africa. From Ghana to Nigeria, Senegal to South Africa, ordinary Africans asked the same question. If Traoré can do it, why not our leaders? That, family, is where the true revolution lives. Not in conference halls, not in the speeches of the African Union, but in the streets, the markets, and the homes of ordinary people who have found hope again. Why did this decision strike so deep? Because it reminded us of Thomas Sankara's warning. He who feeds you controls you. For years, the UN and Western powers fed Africa aid while controlling our narratives. They arrived with cameras, with fact-finding missions, And they always leave behind stories that degrade us. For years we tolerated it. But now Burkina Faso is saying, no more. Think of the irony. The UN accused the Burkinabè army of using child soldiers. The people laughed bitterly. The army that buries grown men by the dozens is now using children. Where were you when terrorists kidnapped kids and forced them into battle? Why don't you write about that? This is why the people see through the game, even if many leaders pretend not to. Traoré has unmasked the so-called international community, exposing the double face they wear, one for show, one for secret deals. An African proverb says, when the drumbeat changes, the dancers must change their steps. Right now, Traoré has changed the rhythm. The question is, will African leaders keep dancing to the old colonial beat, or will they move to the rhythm of sovereignty? One thing is certain, the people have chosen their song. They are with Traoré, they are with Burkina Faso, they are with sovereignty. And that means silence cannot last forever. When the expulsion hit New York, the UN Secretariat scrambled. They muttered about grave concern, human rights, and lack of cooperation. But beneath their anger was fear. Why? Because Traoré set a precedent. He proved that Africa can refuse humiliation, that if you step onto African soil, you must respect African dignity, or leave. That message shook them harder than any speech ever delivered in Addis Ababa, and the whispers began in UN corridors. If Burkina Faso can do this, what if Mali follows? What if Niger follows? What if more African states decide to define their own realities? That fear is real. Because the UN has long been a tool wielded by powerful nations to enforce their version of truth on weaker ones. But Traoré flipped the table. He said, "We are not weak anymore. We are not voiceless. We are not your children. We are sovereign." Western media tried to call him reckless, dangerous, immature. But notice, none of them addressed the real issue. None admitted that the UN's report was baseless and insulting. None admitted that Burkina Faso has every right to defend its honor in the face of terrorism. And ask yourself this, how many times has the UN condemned France for destabilizing the Sahel? How many reports on the foreign networks arming terrorists? How many sanctions on Western companies looting Africa's gold, oil, and uranium? None. Instead, they target the very armies fighting for survival. This is why Traoré's action is more than Burkina Faso's victory. It is Africa's. It is the reclaiming of our right to speak, to define, to protect ourselves, and the people know it. The day after the expulsion, Ouagadougou's streets overflowed. Placards read, "Hands off our country. We stand with Traoré. Africa is not your colony." The chants rang loud. Sovereignty, dignity, revolution. The battlefield is clear now. On one side, the UN and its Western sponsors. On the other, Burkina Faso, the Sahel, and the people who refuse chains. And in the middle, the African leaders too afraid to choose. But silence will not save them. The tide is rising. The people are awake. And when the people roar, no palace wall is strong enough to hold back their voice. Brothers and sisters, what Traoré has done is nothing short of revolutionary. By expelling a UN envoy over a false report, he has rattled the entire system. He has proved that Africa is not a dumping ground for lies. That one leader, backed by his people, can shake the most powerful institutions on earth. Do not forget this. Traoré fights not just for Burkina Faso, he fights for all of Africa. Every insult hurled at his army is an insult hurled at ours. Every attempt to silence him is an attempt to silence us all. But today, the African spirit is awake. From Ouagadougou to Bamako, Niamey to Accra, Dakar to Johannesburg, one word spreads like wildfire: revolution. The UN may frown, Western capitals may plot, but the people are watching, the people are learning, the people are rising. And with every step Traoré takes, he proves the age of silence is gone. The age of African dignity has begun. So let the UN, France, the US, and every foreign master take note. From this day forward, a new message echoes across Africa. Respect us or leave us, but never again will you control us. This, my brothers and sisters, is the fire Captain Traoré has lit, and it will not go out. This is Ibrahim Traoré's era. Like, share, and subscribe, because history is unfolding before our eyes.